Welcome to the Greenway Outdoors Podcast, your trusted source for outdoor information and entertainment. The Greenway Outdoors is also an internationally syndicated TV show and conservation advocate aimed at bringing millennials and Generation Z into the outdoors. Welcome to the Greenway Outdoors. Hello and welcome to episode 51 of the Greenway Outdoors Podcast. I am Kyle.
I'm Jeff.
I'm AJ.
I'm Ryan.
I always sound like a weirdo when I'm like, I am Kyle. I was so unsure of it that I had to be super specific.
Announce myself.
Now we have a guest in the studio today. His name's Jim. And Jim, you've told me your last name 3 times now, and I've dodged it every single time. But will you say your first and last name for us?
My name is Jim Felgenauer.
And the reason why Jim is here today is he's the president of Clair-Detroit River Sturgeon for Tomorrow, which is a conservation organization based in Michigan and obviously based around sturgeon in the Detroit and St. Clair rivers. I guess the name pretty much didn't even need to describe it, but I did. So.
I like that, a lot of places when they do an act, like they do their name and then they do an acronym and they want to make it something. I'm glad that you didn't do that because I don't like acronyms.
No?
Like he's not good wrist, like
it sounds
whatever
like a personal problem to me.
Yeah.
Everybody does acronyms. It's like, oh, you haven't heard of this thing? Like, no, it's because you just say the full name. Like, come on.
The reason why Jim is I'm just going to not acknowledge it. We'll act like Jeff's not here. But the reason Jim's getting a taste for who we are right away right now. The reason why we had Jim come in as our sturgeon expert is because the episode 1 is going to air on Sportsman Channel beginning the week of January 1st, with the main premiere coming January 4th, which is a Saturday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, is our sturgeon episode, which is the episode 1 of season 4 of the Greenway Outdoors television show. And because of that, I was doing some research for the Conservation Corner, which is weird because that's like, if Jeff had one job, that's the job. But here I am doing yeah, exactly. So the one thing I'm doing is Jeff's job to put together the Conservation Corner for
everyone
for the episode. And because of that, I stumbled across this page because there's not that much information out there, at least detailed. And I came across this page and messaged him, and then Jim, you got back to me right away.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I do. I just retired from full-time work, and people that are in business, they respond quickly. So,
right.
That's a good point.
And you guys are interesting, by the way. You're kind of like a younger version of myself. I've seen a little bit of some of the stuff that you're doing, and I see a lot of myself in you. So it's good to see a young group coming up and fishing and hunting as hard and as smart as you guys do.
Well, I'm glad to see that you've matured and gotten away from that.
My legs aren't as young.
What did you do for full-time work before you got into all this stuff?
Well, I still am a certified arborist. I worked for Owen Tree Service for the last 23 years.
Okay.
So
that's cool.
Doing diagnostics and bidding tree work and that kind of thing. So I'm a pretty good tree man as well.
Gotcha. Now,
it's good to have a tree man.
You had said that you saw some of our stuff. What have you seen so far?
I've looked at a couple of podcasts, and I have also watched some of your television. I watched a lake trout segment where you, like I used to do, fished real hard for a couple of days and didn't catch anything, and then trekked across a couple of miles of ice, dragging a big heavy shanty. And, I've been there and done that.
So. That was that's one of our season 3 episodes, was that lake trout episode where it literally took 3 days to get one fish, but then we ended up getting, did you see the monster walleye we caught that day too?
Yeah.
It's a good day.
Yeah, I mean, it was like 28 3/4 inches, and it had to be 29 to be a master angler. So I was like, come on.
We were measuring it with the guy that we went out with had a spud, and he just marked inches on it. It's like, I bet that's a little short. We should get a real measuring tape to.
Jeff pulled out his iPhone and held the phone up to the fish, and it registers. Now, it's an iPhone.
Yep.
So it's just like taking a perspective, and it tells you how big it is.
The measure app, yeah.
And it says 28 3/4 inches. And I know it's got to be 29 in order to get it. I was like, These, okay, Mr. Mark on the Spud and Mr. Use Your Cell Phone, neither
Yep.
of these are accurate enough for me to
Not official measurements.
I think it only does half inches, so it's going 28 and a half, 29, 28 and a half, and then it ended up staying on 20 and a half. It's like,
You know what? There's an old-fashioned thing. Maybe you guys, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called a tape measure.
A what now?
Yeah, you'd think
You would think.
is the last thing on the list.
it's one more thing to bring. We bring enough stuff.
Yeah, we got snacks and drinks and
We got
the
priorities.
heater.
We assumed we weren't going to catch one. It's been 3 days, so we,
and
didn't
stuff
bother.
from the year before.
Oh,
It was sick once they started biting, though. I don't know if it was worth it that it took 3 days, but it was pretty cool when we finally got those fish.
For sure.
It's pretty awesome.
But it was worth it. It makes a good story.
It does.
sure.
And that is true. Is like most of our best episodes are ones that end up taking 2 or 3 days to film. And at the time, we're always like, oh no. But then it always ends up being that we have more content because of it. Even the sturgeon one, not to give anything away, but it took 2 days to catch a sturgeon as well. You know what I mean? Just we got bad luck with weather the one day, and it just didn't go well. And then
And
didn't
of course,
get
the
one.
camera factor, because they limited 10 times the day before.
Oh, they couldn't wait to tell us something.
everything's camera shy.
Yeah, when that's the thing that we get is everywhere we go, they're like, "Well, yesterday we caught so many." It's like, I bet.
Oh, I believe you, actually.
It's always yesterday.
I know it was.
Yeah, but you know what? The thing that I got out of that and that I think is really cool is that you stuck with it. You didn't give up. You kept your optimism. And sometimes that is what makes the difference between a successful and an unsuccessful trip.
You're absolutely right, and it's the dedication to succeeding isn't always easy, but sometimes when it pays off like that, you feel so much more rewarded. You know, if I would have gone out there and caught a fish in 15 minutes the first day, would I have been as excited about the fish? No way. You know what I mean? You're so much more excited that third day when you
earned
feel
it.
that tug on the line, and it's pretty exciting.
And you know what? And by the time you got those fish, I was watching the TV. I was cheering for you guys.
Yeah, that's
good. That's nice.
what we expect. No, I love that. Hopefully, your wife didn't think you were crazy shouting from the other room.
I think she was asleep.
Okay. Yeah. So just wanted to let everyone know a quick little current event thing. I read on Instagram from our friends at the Sportsman Alliance today that there was actually Senator Donzella James, who's a Democrat out of Atlanta, has attempted to pass legislation in order to ban all semi-automatic guns, and that includes hunting shotguns, which is obviously like I use my shotgun for hunting is a semi-automatic, and me possessing that gun definitely doesn't put anybody in danger, but it certainly puts food on my table. And
How dare you?
yeah, exactly. But not only that, the Second Amendment wasn't invented in order to protect hunting rights. The Second Amendment was intended to protect all of our rights. So, big bummer to see that. I don't know how it's going to be assigned. I think in a state like Georgia, it'll get dismissed pretty quickly.
I would assume.
They're a really conservative state, but I just want to make everyone aware that that's going on, and kind of sad to see something.
If you are from Georgia, reach out to your local
Yeah, it's important.
representative.
Rest in peace.
I can't imagine it gets much traction.
Yeah, I think too. It gets publicity. I think for the fact that it won't get traction because it's like the threats everywhere is kind of the thing that they're trying to put out there. But I think you'd see a revolt pretty strong if you try to take all the semi-auto shotguns away from people in Georgia.
Yeah,
So,
no doubt.
yeah.
Just because you think that it's not going anywhere doesn't mean to be apathetic and not be involved. You still have to write to your representative
There you go.
and support your position.
You're
it is.
exactly right, Jim. Yeah, because otherwise, I mean, that something like that slips through because no one cared, and then what? So,
It's like trapping in California.
Right.
That was banned. Like, what benefit does that provide?
Yeah, what were
like,
the numbers on that? Like, though there was only like
There weren't that
there's
many.
something in the teens amount of trappers in the entire state of
that's
California.
right. Yeah.
So because there was only I'm talking like let's say 13, 17, somewhere in that range, total licenses sold in the entire state of California for trapping.
Yeah.
So because of that, the funding wasn't enough to sustain the program. So then it was having to be
that's right.
it was having to be subsidized.
Subsidized?
I almost got it with the taxpayer dollars. And as soon as that happens, as soon as there's not enough participation, then they cut it because then everyone can complain about it. And then they started talking about animal cruelty and how mean trapping is and this and that. And then, so, yeah, like you said, it's if you look away, even something that you may not care that much about, like trapping in California, it's like one little nick and then it starts to snowball and you really have to protect everything like that. So that's why we're part of the Sportsman Alliance. They're the ones fighting to help protect us from stupid laws like that and keep those things off the ballots and get rid of them in court. And they do a lot in the courts to protect our rights. So shout out to them. So, Jim,
Nice.
I wanted to dive into your organization. Tell me about the St. Clair-Detroit River Sturgeon for Tomorrow organization. How did it get started? It sounds like, talking behind the scenes a little bit, it started about the same way the Green Bay Outdoors did.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, I had done a couple of TV segments with Michigan Outdoors Television, including a night of sturgeon fishing. So one of the fisheries biologists working for the Department of Natural Resources was contacted by National Geographic Television. They wanted to do a fishing segment as part of a program about the impact that Asian carp may have on lake sturgeon populations if the carp find their way into the Great Lakes.
Okay.
Nice.
So, actually, Gary Towns asked me to organize that National Geographic trip.
Okay.
Set that up, get some boats, get some anglers, which I did. But the thing is, what that drove home was that we have a very unique fishery in the St. Clair River.
Yeah.
When these guys are doing a segment about carp over in Illinois and Chicago, and they're looking for a place to fish, and the only place they can find is the St. Clair River, a little light goes off that says, we have something special here.
Yeah,
So,
no kidding.
and I knew of another chapter, the Black Lake chapter of Sturgeon for Tomorrow, the Sturgeon General, Brenda Archambault, and I had an opportunity to meet with her. I asked her, I recognized there was a niche there to be filled in southeast Michigan. How do you start a Sturgeon for Tomorrow chapter? And she gave me the best advice I ever got. I'll never forget it. She said, find people with a shared passion and the proper skill sets. So a couple of years later, I just looked around and I had the right people around me and had to make a decision whether to push the go button. So I did. We all got together, and probably the same way you started your little business here is we got a few guys and talked about what we wanted to do, what we wanted it to look like, whether it was going to be a conservation organization or a fishing organization. As it turns out, it's both, because fishermen, anglers are some of the best conservationists.
Yep.
And it has just expanded and taken off beyond our wildest dreams.
What show were you filming for National Geographic?
It was a monster fish series with Zeb Hogan, and it was Monster Fish Flying Carp, it was called.
I think I'll have to go back. That's on Netflix now, I believe. I think it went to Netflix. It may not now, because I think National Geographic is partnering with
Disney
Plus. So they may have poached it, but I know at one point I believe it was on Netflix.
I wouldn't call it they purchased it.
They took it back. They took it back.
Yeah, more like took it back.
It's not like they stole it or anything.
What was your experience out there filming with them?
Well, it was a lot of fun, for one thing. Sturgeon in general are fun to begin with, but they came out with a surprising amount of equipment and very professional.
Yeah.
And we actually landed 3 fish. So, and interestingly enough, it was I actually hooked up 2 of the fish and passed one off to another boat. Zeb Hogan was on my buddy's boat, and he landed that fish. And what we did is we contrived a hook set, right?
Oh, yeah.
So this is really interesting because
we don't know nothing about that.
When you're watching the program, you'll see Zeb set the hook, and then you'll see him fighting the fish, and it's actually a different rod.
Yeah.
So I was like watching Jeremy Wade on his program.
River Monsters.
River Monsters, and same thing. I see him, he's fighting this fish downstream, right? And he's got this fishing rod, and it shows him a little farther downstream, and it's going like,
That's not the same rod.
Not the same rod.
Not many people pick up on that. That's pretty awesome.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
That is funny. If you're gonna do it, at least have the same. I have guerrilla filming experts, so I almost never have to do that with these two. But we are lucky though that AJ, his background isn't in hunting at all. Ryan's is, but AJ's been doing it here the longest. So he has like a clear understanding from a film perspective, whereas Ryan's younger and has a good perspective from the hunting aspect, that they both see things differently. And because of them, we're lucky enough that they're always just on it, that we never have to do stuff like that. To the most part. I mean, I'm not going to say that we never have, but for the most part, we don't really have to worry about those things unless there's some outside variable like a shanty blowing off of us when a tip-up goes off or something, Because if it's happened, we filmed almost 50 episodes now, AJ. We're at like 46, 47.
Dang. That's crazy.
That is
Holy
weird.
cow.
Yeah. But, so you guys landed 3 fish. Any monsters in that group, or?
One fish was about 5 foot. We also got a little baby sturgeon and another medium-sized one. Nice. But that's a pretty high-pressure situation because we had one night to get it done, right? So we just got a bunch of good anglers together, and got a bunch of boats and a lot of baits in the water, and just made it happen.
So essentially, the idea, because that's interesting to us, obviously, because normally it's just us setting off, the 4 of us together to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
But. So you guys had a bunch of boats and all the best anglers you had. Everybody's just trying to hook into sturgeon, and then in order to pass it off to him, basically.
Well, yeah, and then he also filmed me landing a fish, which he wanted to do as well, right? But he's kind of the star of the show and whatever. Sure. And we had one boat that was a designated camera boat. And then we also had my buddy's boat, which was a 25 sport craft, was rigged up with lighting and that kind of thing. And Zeb was on his boat. So we had a boat roving and doing some filming. And then, ideally, what we were hooking for is that they would hook up a fish on the boat that Zeb was actually on, which they did, a small one. And, so we'd hook up a fish. We'd have to wait until the camera boat got over, of course, right? So you're just kind of holding the fish there without any fighting.
It's like yanking,
And Zeb actually argued with me. He says, well, we want to get you landing a fish. I'm going like, no. I said, you got to get one. I said, this might be the only big fish we get tonight. And I said, I know it's a big one. So do you want it? Or,
That's pretty cool, though, that he was like that. That's neat.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, the perspective of filming, AJ, you'll probably want to weigh in on this, too. It's funny to hear what you can get away with when it comes to fishing, as far as camera boats and filming and lights and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff that you'd never... And I think that lends to why if you go to Netflix and you go to Hulu and you go to Disney Plus and you go to National Geographic, all these different places, you'll see fishing shows, but you never see hunting. And I think it's simply because, other than Meat Eater, and that's simply because creating a high-quality hunting and fishing show, hunting specifically, is so much more difficult than fishing, because you can have all those boats and all those cameras and stuff like that. You got to be dead silent when you're hunting. It's not, you can't have a bunch of lights out there when you're duck hunting.
You can make a bad hunting show really easy.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
If you'd like to know, go check out. But that's true. Is there's a lot of, and that's why there's a lot of bad hunting shows, is because the people that typically do it are hunters and the cameramen second.
Yep.
And then versus the camera guys that learn to hunt, and the combination of the two, takes a weird mold. But we're trying to perfect it as best we can, but it creates its own, like for instance, running the drone. We can't run the drone until we're done hunting. Because in some areas, because or well before, because of legal reasons.
Sure.
Oh, that's right.
Depending on where we are and what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually the fishing ones are like, okay, there's some relief here. We can now mess with the story a little bit easier and film it the way we want to, as opposed to we have to wait for something to happen. Could take 10 minutes, could take 2 days.
Yeah, and like the access deer episode we talked about on last podcast is like sneaking up on an access deer was so difficult. And then once we got, it's like, that access deer is there, we just snuck up on him, we crawled up to him within 50 yards, and now it's either we get him or don't, and I can't wait for this camera guy or that camera guy or whatever else to make it happen, which is why I have the best in the world with these two. But otherwise, if it wasn't for them, it'd be impossible. I mean, it's just hard.
I can't imagine doing what we do, like especially when we split off and we each take one camera guy. to have 4 or 5 people behind us, like one doing sound, one doing.
Yeah,
Can't.
right,
There's
dude.
no-
That
there's
would never
no way.
happen.
You never have.
There's no way.
You
No.
could probably have one and two.
Yeah.
Be
because
tough.
even if they're super good hunters, it takes so much work to be that.
Stealthy.
You have to be that good at hunting too. You know what I mean? And yet all the other variables like stepping on a stick. Well, now you got 4 people that might step on that stick, and then it's gone.
4 times as much scent
Yep.
in the woods.
Right.
And like and 4 guys being real quiet isn't really interesting to watch.
No, and then it's not. And then how genuine is it too? You know what I mean? Is because then everything's recreated and stuff. So we've really gone out of our way to run in the 4 of us traveling everywhere together and doing everything just the 4 of us. We bring in independent contractors at times for fishing episodes, but never hunting because it's just won't work.
What was the?
Why are you writing my name a bunch of times on your sheet of paper? Are you making fun of me because that's what
I'm
I
not.
Who's Ryan Green?
do? And why are you putting it hard around it?
Oh my god.
That was
I'll
pretty
kill you.
Yeah. What were we gonna say?
What was your briefing like before filming began? Once they arrived, like on scene, like was there any like shakedown, like talk that they gave you or anything?
This is how it's gonna go.
No, not really. It was funny though because the only thing that I had pretty much done as a preliminary thing was I emailed a picture of my buddy's boat so they knew what to bring in terms of lighting equipment, sound equipment, that kind of thing. But I took a little time off and did some pre-fishing the week before, and Claire Nolan was the producer. So I was out on the river the evening before, and she was at one of the local bars that's on the river, and she called me. And I said, well, where are you? She says, well, I'm at the bar here at Pearl Beach. And I said, well, I'm just right out in the river, right out in front of you, right? So
You're like waving.
So we're waving. You know, she comes down, she walks out on the dock, and she looks at my boat, and she goes, are they all like this?
Oh,
And I'm going, yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. We got it handled, you know. So that's about all.
Was
that
she saying because you had like sturgeon guts in there? Or what was she saying that for?
No. I think she wasn't too impressed with the size of my boat. I had a Crestliner 1750 Fishhawk at the time, but you know, and we actually I had a guy out there with a 35-foot Bertram, which was really nice that to use for a camera boat. My buddy's 25 sport craft, so. Yeah, and then a couple other fishing boats, so it worked out really, really well.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. Yeah, I'm always fascinated to hear like the industry stuff on the other side. You know, like the other shows.
Yeah. What was there any? You had talked about how they kind of snuck their way through catching the fish. Was there any like reshoots you guys had to do? Like as far when you were filming, what were some things that they like stopped all fishing for? Did they do that at all?
Nothing.
They just fished the whole time.
Yeah,
And just filmed what they got.
exactly.
Okay.
Well, if you're worried about getting a fish, you got to do that and get the fish, and then maybe you go back afterwards. I would think.
I don't know.
The only thing I think was contrived was the hook set on
Yeah.
the swim ladder. You know,
Yeah.
tying the line to the swim ladder. So
The old swim
He
ladder
went out,
set.
caught some the day before, tied him to a big rock, and then went over to the rock the next day.
So the actual conservation organization, getting back to the sturgeon side of things, the actual conservation organization, you started it because you were passionate about the sturgeon populations in the Detroit River, as well as the St. Clair River. And I've done a lot of research over, the last few months on sturgeon. Jeff's job again. But basically, what I've really discovered was it sounds like in the 1800s, pre-1900, they were caught as bycatch a lot. And they're talking about like hundreds of thousands, even millions of pounds.
What's bycatch?
Bycatch is like, I didn't mean to catch you, but I caught you in my net.
Oh, okay.
And so they were catching a lot of them that way.
It's like what happens when I talk to girls. It's like, oh, stop! I don't need all of you.
Touche.
Good one. I like it. But that was good, Ryan. But we don't lie on our podcast, so. But anyhow, basically they would catch them as bycatch, and when they would get them, they would say, okay, these things are a pain in the butt, and they would just kill them, throw them on shore, and I guess some of them melted them down for some sort of wax that they would make out of them. Then once it got into the 1900s, they started discovering that they had market value, especially overseas, for their eggs, as well as their flesh itself was being eaten.
Yeah, in the late 1800s, yeah.
In the late 1800s, early 1900s, I'm seeing different, like, the dates range a little bit from the different studies. But then once it got from, like, 1920 to, like, 1980, apparently no one's got a damn clue what was going on. They're just like, we don't know what happened. No one really kept track, but the numbers declined.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
nobody really cared. They up until the early 20th century, once that commercial fishery developed, the fish actually had some value, right?
Right.
Well, once the fish were almost gone, there was no value anymore or no interest, and the world just moved on. We had the Industrial Revolution. Henry Ford was starting to make cars. The Wright brothers were inventing airplanes and that kind of thing. So, and that affected a lot of spawning areas as well. We had damming of rivers. We had siltation from deforestation, which occurred. The big lumbering era at the time. And people really didn't care about the environment at all. Actually, on the south end of Harson's Island, just downstream of the old club, there's an island there called Trash Island. And that island is...
Is it nice?
Yeah, if you like pop, old bottles and things, it is,
They got one of those out in the Pacific Ocean here.
Yeah.
It's like a small country.
A lot of plastic out there.
And if you ever go to Jeff's house, I'm just kidding.
Clean.
Impressively.
Yeah, his house is clean.
It was amazing.
Why is that amazing?
It was more
I guess
clean
you see
than
my
a
truck.
normal
My
home.
truck isn't clean, but my house is pretty clean.
Is it still called trash?
Yeah, because your truck, that's why. Your truck's a perfect example of why we didn't think your house would be clean. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Why? Like we've judged you improperly. You ever shared a hotel room with yourself? It's disgusting. Anyhow. So, Industrial Revolution happens, and I know that the Canada and then Michigan, the United States, got together to, was it like something like 42 or 47 points of interest throughout the Great Lakes water system that they wanted to restore. Is that right? Am I saying the right numbers?
There's some areas of concern, or what they're called.
Yeah, and they put an act together, Canada and the United States together, to bring it back, and they've done a great job. I mean, I hear stories that Lake Erie would actually be on fire.
The Rouge River, exactly 50 years ago was the last time the Rouge River in Detroit caught on fire. And the Cuyahoga River in Ohio actually caught on fire, I think, like 13 different times.
Just because of all the pollution.
In my lifetime, in 1969, the rivers that were feeding into the Detroit River caught fire. We had that much pollution.
Good Lord.
Unreal.
That's insane.
So the pollution, I'm sure that weighed on the sturgeon as well, I would assume, right?
Yep, absolutely. So all of those factors combined really devastated that population. And, the takeaway for me from that is that our attitudes matter. Okay, lake sturgeon have some defense mechanisms in their early life stages. When they're very young, they have a very mottled appearance that gives them some camouflage.
Yeah.
They grow very quickly in their first few years, and they also have those very sharp scutes when they are young.
So sharp. I got to hold one.
Yes.
And I think one of the pictures rotated through when we went to that the hatchery. And I got to hold one.
Oh, yeah.
And AJ was saying, he's like, hold still, because I want to get the picture. But the guy, it was going like this.
Yeah.
I'm like, this really hurts. I was like, ouch, Charlie. But but AJ's like, hold still. But keep going. I'm sorry. It just.
Yeah. But, most predation occurs in those early life stages when those fish are quite small. Now, you can imagine, let's say, the 8 or 10-year-old fish is maybe 35 to 40 inches. Okay.
Not much getting them anymore.
Not much getting them anymore. Okay, not even the biggest fish in the Great Lakes is maybe a muskie, another predator fish.
Sure. It's still not going to.
A muskie isn't going to affect that sturgeon population.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the only thing that's going to affect that sturgeon population beyond his 8th or 10th year of life?
The worst of all, us.
Human beings, right?
Yeah.
And the attitude that humans had back 100 years ago had a big impact. And the way we think about things now also still has a big impact.
Sure.
The only difference is we're now having a more positive impact on the environment and different species, including the lake sturgeon.
And I would say finally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And now, what are we seeing now? Because, like I said, through the 1970s or so, they had no clue what was going on. They just knew the numbers were going down because, like you said, attitudes matter. No one cared. Now, what is happening in the present day when we look at it?
Well, one of the reasons for such great success for us, I think, was a matter of timing. Is we started our organization when interest was really starting to grow about environmental issues,
Sure.
and about Lake Sturgeon in particular.
What year was it that you started it?
2010
Okay.
was actually when we started our organization. But on a worldwide basis, there are a lot of rehabilitation efforts by government agencies, by private nonprofits, a lot of scientists, education people.
Yeah.
And again, the importance of that is that we're tied to these fish. They need a clean, healthy environment and clean flowing water, well oxygenated water, and that's exactly the same thing that we need, right? So they're considered an indicator species.
Like the canary in a mine.
Like the canary in the coal mine, and you can probably look at lake sturgeon populations, and if they're not healthy, then we probably have a problem,
Right.
And that we're going to be affected by.
Right.
So
are they coming back now?
yeah, but it's a long process. Lake sturgeon the females don't spawn until they're probably over 20 years old, 20 to 24 years
Yeah,
old.
some as late as 33, they were saying. But normally it's the 20 to 25 year mark is what I read.
When we were at the hatchery in South Dakota, it was a very good representation of tax dollars well spent with the operation that they had there.
Oh my gosh, it was awesome.
You felt good about the progress that's being made by us.
And they had that, I was telling you earlier, and we talked about it on an earlier podcast, the Fish Hatchery podcast, I think it's just episode 3 of this season, episode 48-ish, 48 or 47, called Fish Hatchery. But anyhow, on that we talked about the fish hatchery that we went to in South Dakota, where they go out every year, and they'll catch 2 wild sturgeon, a male and a female, and they'll take the sperm and the eggs and make babies, and then they'll save like 100 of those every single year. And then they keep them forever. So the oldest ones were 22 or 23 years old at the hatchery, and then for every year they had a group of them. That way, if all the pallet sturgeon should go out of the Missouri River, the species is still around. You know what I mean? So it's like forward-thinking Jurassic Park.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yes, I like that.
Where are they? There.
If say sturgeon, you might not know the answer to this. If they were just wiped out one day, just gone, what do you know? What would happen to our ecosystem? Like what the direct result of them being gone would be?
Well, no, I'd be more concerned about
Why?
they were gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever.
So that's
whatever.
always that concern always comes before.
Because they're not.
What next?
They're not really
Right.
a top predator. So because they're not a top predator, there's less impact. Like for instance, a lot of people don't know this, but let's say you took a controlled pond setting, right? So you got a controlled pond, and you have 100 bluegill in it, and nothing else. What will happen is they'll eat out all food that could be eaten there will be gone, and then they'll only be relying on bugs, and then they'll continue to reproduce and reproduce and reproduce. But none of them will have enough food in order to grow big. So then, instead of just having 100 good-sized bluegill, you'll have like 2,000, and they'll all be tiny. And none of them will get big. And it's called stunting. And a lake can get stunted without proper predation. So then, if you were to put 2 bass and 3 pike in there with those 100 bluegills, then what'll happen is they'll eat some of them, they'll reproduce, they'll eat some of them, and then because of that, you'll have more good food for more for
more plant life.
Yeah, for all the species, but not just all that. So now there might only be 65 bluegill left, but there's
that's
plenty
right.
of food for those 65. So when they reproduce, then some of those will get ate. So the numbers will stay more in balance. You'll have the ecosystem will be able to sustain, and it'll be more balanced. And because of that, the fish will actually be able to grow big.
Okay.
Which is why in a lake, unless you don't want big fish, you need to have top predators as well. Sturgeon isn't a top predator. They eat leeches and mussels and shells and things like that off the bottom. I'm sure they eat other small fish, but for the most part, they eat things sitting pretty still, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, being bottom feeders, it's interesting. One of my people on my board of directors was out one night during the mayfly hatch and actually saw a lake sturgeon near the surface, kind of up on its side a little bit, and it was sucking mayflies off the surface.
That's cool.
Yeah, very cool. Not what you normally think of for sturgeon,
not
right?
at all.
So because of that behavior, obviously they act a little bit different, and that's important though. If you for lakes and ecosystems and stuff like that, is why top predators are absolutely 100% necessary. And it's the same thing for our deer herd. You know, you take out, you know, right now, let's use us, you know, Michigan as an example, Lower Peninsula. So we're not supposed to have wolves. We have a few different ways that deer die. Number one is disease. Number two is predation. So being ripped apart by predators, and I'm being a little vulgar on purpose. Hit by cars, starvation, and a hunter. Those are the 5 ways that deer die in the Lower Peninsula, period. And if you are meaning to tell me that the quick, clean death of an arrow or a bullet is not the nicest out of those, then you're crazy. And the problem is, that is how they're going to die, and then their meat's consumed. So that's very important by us, and it's very sustainable. But beyond that, if you really look at it, if we were gone, then similar things would happen with deer that would happen with fish in a pond. You take out the top predators, if you got rid of hunting for like a year or two, the population would boom and then bust. And the reason it would boom because none would get killed, so there'd be more babies and this and that. But you need to harvest the surplus in order to make room for next year's fawns. If you do not do that, there will always be more babies. There will not be more food and habitat. And the habitat can only sustain so much. So if the people that are anti-hunting, if we got rid of hunting, what you would see is a population boom, which our car insurance agencies would absolutely hate because it's already insane. The population number is what it is. It would boom. There wouldn't be enough food, so nature would take its course with disease because they'd be too pressed together, and starvation, and predators would have a field day. And then because of those things, mainly the starvation, many of them would die through the first or second winter. And then once they all died, gruesome death, it would be a population bust, and then we would go back to having almost no deer. So by hunting and harvesting deer, you're actually making the deer herd stable enough that it can survive winters. Otherwise, you could lose the entire deer herd by not hunting. So thank a hunter.
Well, and again, you know, and you make another point to be taken from that is that, again, what we do affects the things around. We are a part of nature. We affect the nature around us. And you say we affect that in a positive way by hunting, but you know, if nobody hunted, that would also affect it as well, right?
You betcha.
Right. So and if nobody was hunting, in the hunting and fishing dollars and license sales and Pittman Robertson money, those are was where the money comes for conservation. If a lot of people that in an urban setting don't think they're impacting the environment, they're not impacting nature, when in fact they really are.
Right.
And you know, and they should support that. But what we do and how we think makes a huge difference, whether we live in a city or whether we're out hunting or not. You know, so we need to appreciate that.
Absolutely. It's all a balance. And we are so prominent, you know, period, people are, that we're such a big part of every ecosystem now that, you know, it's our job to manage it properly, because now we're involved in everything. And there's some weirdos out there that like animals more than people and wishes there wasn't people and this and that, and there's too many people. And people are important, okay? I'm on team people. That's what Joe Rogan always says. And because of that, we have to manage all those things properly. I've got another question for you, though, reminding me of it with the mayfly. When we were out sturgeon fishing, we observed something that I didn't even know happened, and I don't know why it made sense. Couldn't get it on camera because the sturgeon are jerks, but basically, they were getting out of the water and jumping and then slamming their bodies back into the water. They were splashing all around us. And I I was like, what are they doing? You know what I mean? Why do they do that?
Nobody knows.
Okay.
You know, we've asked biologists and other experts on that. Nobody knows for sure. But it's a lot of fun to see that when you're out there, and it's quite exciting.
I saw
Almost frustrating.
And
Yeah.
a little taunting.
when you're not catching anything, it's actually hilarious. But like you're not catching them, but you know they're there.
Well, especially when they're jumping right by the boat. I've had them actually like jump my anchor line, you know, and it's like, oh my God.
We had one that was
Bite the
right
hook.
next to the boat.
Yeah.
That's how they have fun.
Yeah, maybe
They
that's
got a good sense of humor.
yeah.
Well, you know, and people, you know, we think of them as feeding on the bottom, but they don't necessarily always spend all of their time on the bottom.
Right.
A lot of times when you're going up and down the river, you see them on your fish finder. They'll be suspended up in the water column some. And again, that jumping behavior, a lot of times you'll see them up near the surface. So, you know, and it's funny because I've caught and handled enough fish that they're really kind of cool. They're like big old cows, and they kind of each have their own little personality. And we see that also because we raise fish in aquariums for our Sturgeon in the Classroom program.
Okay.
And my vice president had 2 fish, and we give them names. He called one lazy, and he called one crazy, right? Because they acted so differently in the tank. One of them was
That's
just laying
literally
back
Jeff
all
and
the
I.
time.
That is literally Jeff and I.
Yeah.
Lazy.
Better than crazy.
It depends.
Yeah. So,
Is sturgeon the biggest Michigan fish?
Yes.
It is?
yeah, by far.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Muskie would be second, but doesn't come that close even.
Do you know what the biggest state record is for?
It's around 196 pounds, I think.
Jeez.
Oh my gosh.
And that, you know, and that goes back to a time when you could keep them probably during the spawning season.
Right.
You know, otherwise you're not going to get that kind of weight.
When I was looking at it, what I found fascinating was the way that the males and females must live very differently based on the lazy and crazy thing you talked about. And the reason why is I noticed that the average male only lives to be 60, and the average female lives well over 100. Up to 150 years old, they said, for females.
Yeah, yeah.
So they must be
They
must be doing something wildly different in behavior.
I don't know. It's probably just like humans, you know. It's because their wives drive them crazy.
Right.
Yeah, the wives drive the husbands into an early grave. You
And
know?
the males only reproduce something like every 2 to 4 years, and the females it's much longer than that.
3 to 5 years.
Yeah, 3 to 5. But so in any given population of sturgeon in the Detroit River and the St. Clair River, only 10% of the fish each year are actually the ones spawning.
Oh, wow.
Of the overall population, only 10% will be spawning. Very interesting.
Very. They're a weird. It's not weird. It's very interesting, and there's a lot of similarities. And if you think about it, how long it takes in between each time they breed, how long they live. It's almost very similar to human. How
We got to get him out more.
I'm not kidding.
Oh, like
Their
you're breeding
tendencies.
not until you're
Oh,
later
you-
in life?
Oh, you mean like don't have babies till you're like
The age that they start having babies, how long in between they have babiys.
23 and then every 2 to 4 years?
That
Yeah.
actually makes
Yeah,
sense.
that is actually
He's
does.
not just they're little slimy lake people.
I thought it was an elaborate.
Personalities.
I'm just saying, it's kind of weird how similar it is to our tendencies.
Yeah.
One of the quotes in the show that I mentioned was like, when you're setting out for the fish, there's like a certain level of respect that you have for the fish above and beyond a normal fish. You always respect them because like the fish that I'm catching is probably older than I am.
Yeah.
So that's a weird perspective. Like, and then I was like, well, if it's a female, she could live for 150 years. I was like, she could have been around during World War II, or like when the Titanic sank. And it's like and then like I said in the show, I'm like, it's easy to think that some of those fish down there have to know more about fishing than I do. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Just from observing.
Yeah.
for 100+ years.
Yeah,
You
it's
haven't
nuts.
seen what I've seen.
Why is that your sturgeon voice?
Well, if you're 150 years old, you probably don't sound very good.
That's true.
Yeah, makes sense.
You don't sound good and you're like 30.
Is there a goal or like population you're trying to reach as far as sturgeon goes? Like, is there something in mind that you guys are striving for right now?
More.
No, I don't. I don't have a set number.
Okay.
And I don't think anybody knows what that number is right now. Lake Sturgeon will never be resurrected to previous levels. I mean, you again mentioned millions of pounds of fish harvested every year out of Lake Erie and the Detroit River.
We don't have millions of fish now, period. I mean, there's probably, what do you think, there is 1 million pounds, you think?
I don't know, in pounds-wise, there's probably in the St. Clair River system 50,000 fish, St. Clair-Detroit River system.
That sounds like a lot. Is it though? Is that a lot?
No, that's not very many fish at all.
Okay.
When you're talking about millions and millions of walleyes.
Yeah.
So,
that's what it was 100-something years ago?
No, it's what it is now.
Not
50,000 now. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of fish back 100 years ago.
okay.
Right.
That's
But
crazy.
there's millions of walleye now, though.
Okay.
But again, what we're trying to do is the same thing you're trying to do, is we want to affect people's attitudes. And, you know, the other thing is, too, and what I appreciate most about you guys is that you're young. And, you know, I'm going to be pushing up daisies sometime, and you're still going to be around and kicking. And I need somebody to take over the mission here, right? And you guys, for young guys, have great wisdom.
Thank you.
And a lot of enthusiasm. And
Very much.
And it just makes me feel like I'm leaving the world in good hands.
I appreciate that very much.
That's awesome.
It's a big honor.
Thank you.
Nice.
That actually reminds me of a point that when you and I were talking on the phone that I found crazy interesting. With all this, like the sturgeon conservation stuff, it's really easy to wonder, and we talked about this in the show, is keeping one, right? Like killing one when the numbers are coming back, obviously, and they're getting better, and there's laws in place that you can only keep a slot fish where we were at the time, 42 to 50 inches. We didn't catch one in the slot, so it didn't come up. But the point was,
Oh, that's right.
how would people feel if we were to keep one? And I was thinking that we'd probably get some mighty backlash. But when I asked you about it, I was curious what you'd say, because, you know, people that are so close to something from a conservation standpoint, they're just super passionate about it. I was wondering what you thought of people keeping it. And you had some interesting facts on how many people actually register and keep fish every year. Will you talk about that a bit?
Sure. You know, we have we work pretty well with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, and they current regulations require that you register a fish if you keep a lake sturgeon, right? So now there's not any prescribed penalties if you don't. So you know, it's actually voluntary. And out of over 1,000 fish that were caught in the Lake St. Clair and the St. Clair River last year, there were 11 fish reported as having been harvested. And the DNR will tell you that probably only half the people actually register their fish. So there was probably, out of over 1,000 fish, probably 24 harvested.
But to be clear, that means 1,000 were caught and brought in the boat, but that doesn't mean they were all slot fish.
Mm-hmm.
That just means 1,000 total fish were caught, brought in the boat, got their pictures, and either let go or caught. But he's saying that only 11 of those 1,000 were registered as slot fish that the angler determined that they were going to keep. And the DNR is saying that, well, that's okay. There's probably actually double that, because half the people don't actually say that they did it.
Yeah.
Sure, you know, in a certain, you know, and you may get some pushback on this, but, you know, my philosophy is that we have regulations that are set that are protecting the sturgeon population, and we also have efforts moving forward to try to continue to build populations, affect them in a positive way. So as long as total mortality, including angling mortality, is below a level that's going to damage the population, then why not?
Right.
See, now, I have always believed, and I work in different capacities with the Department of Natural Resources as an advisor. I just took over as chair of the Lake Erie, Lake St. Clair Citizen Fisheries Advisory Committee, right? So as long as the regulations are such that they're protecting the fish, that's fine. If participation in this fishery increases, which we hope it does, because the only way you can develop an appreciation for these fish is if you interact with them in some way. You have to have some contact to learn to appreciate them.
A resource is only valued by those who utilize the resource.
Yeah, otherwise they're somewhat invisible.
Right.
But, having that fish in the freezer can be kind of a really special thing, because you're not going to have, you might have some walleyes in the freezer, but you're going to have one opportunity to have one fish in the freezer per year of a certain size. And if you enjoy that kind of thing, and I kept one once, and I didn't enjoy it as much as perch and walleye, so it's the last one I'll ever kill. But I wanted to try it. And
I've heard great things from everyone.
Yeah.
I didn't think it would be good, but I've heard great things. What were your thoughts on it?
I may have cooked it wrong.
Okay.
How did you cook it?
I actually baked it with some seasoned breadcrumbs and whatever. Some people smoke them. Some people profess that they are good on the grill with garlic and lemon and that kind of thing. It's a heavier textured fish. It's like a swordfish or a shark or something.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a more of a fishy flavor. There's a lot of fat in the meat, and it's kind of throughout the meat. It's hard to get it out of there.
Yeah.
So when you're cleaning those, you got to be real careful to get as much of the fat out as you can. But no, I mean, that guy that wants to keep that fish and he's not hurting the resource, he has every right to do that.
Right.
And you have arguments about commercial fishing and these different things, and those resources belong to all of us. And as long as the regulations are set to protect that resource, then the people that want to be able to take advantage of that should be able to, and who am I to tell them they can't?
I like that. I got a question.
Can't agree more.
Why the 42 to 50? Not why is there a slot, because I understand you're making specific, so it's a little, you're not keeping every single fish that comes up. But is there something that's going on from 42 to 50?
Well, I think that gives them an opportunity to spawn for the first time. It gets them into a couple of years of sexual maturity, but yet you're not taking out the big females that are
really spawning
and producing a lot of eggs.
Okay.
How old were the 42 to 50?
That depends on female or male.
Yeah, I would say between 10 and 20 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It depends male, female, and
Sure.
now the females are bigger, right?
Yeah, for the most part, I believe so. Yeah,
okay.
generally speaking.
It's so fascinating. Catching them was a rush. I mean, when we finally hooked into one, the one we get in the show is absolutely huge, and
It was big. It was a big fish.
yeah.
Next to paddlefish, I mean, they're huge.
It's funny too, because I didn't have that good of a perspective on inches, and I was like, I bet that's a slot fish. And Mitch, the guy we went with, he goes,
No.
He goes, not even close. I was like, geez, really? How big does it have to be? He goes, Kyle, this is so much bigger than that. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, well, good. Then, yay us, right, guys?
How long did it take for you guys to land that fish?
A while.
A while?
I want to say probably 20 to 25 minutes. He wasn't happy about it.
Yeah.
The fish wasn't.
Well, no. Like I say,
The dig that he took, I had my foot up on the on the thing, the edge of the boat, and it was up in the front. There's a very low rim in the front that goes around, the carpeting or whatever, kind of like a bass boat. And I had my foot on that, and at one point the fish came up. I'm like, all right, he's at the surface, grabbing the net, and he decided to go back down, and it did a thunk, thunk, and I was pulled over, my foot slipped, and Jeff goes, yeah, maybe don't stand there, champ.
Let's see how you
We
swim.
don't need you going in.
Yeah. Would have made for a good show.
Yeah, it was. We were recording.
AJ's I didn't get a good angle on it. Can you get back in and then fall? Oh, he's taking him under.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
You're going to have to do it again, cut. No.
Redo it.
I'm already wet.
but here's the deal, okay? Because I'm out fishing with a charter captain on a muskie charter, right?
Yeah.
And we're we're catching all these fish that are 38 or 40 inches, and I'm going man, these aren't very big. And I said, what do your clients think of this? Well, most people don't the 40-inch fish that weighs 20 pounds is a big fish to them.
Yeah, super impressed.
A lot of people they don't catch those in their lifetime, right?
My biggest northern pike is only 36 inches.
Yeah. So the average sturgeon is the same as the big muskie. A big muskie's 52, 53 inches and weighs 30 pounds or better, right?
Then you got to be 54 to mount, I think, at least in Wisconsin where we were. But yeah.
But then so now that's an average sturgeon, and to put this in perspective, I have seen sturgeon as big as 76 inches and 150 pounds.
Wow.
So it's a thrill.
I got one more question for you, and we only got 2 minutes left, so it's got to be a 2-minute answer. This is a long-going argument between Jeff and I, okay?
Oh, jeez.
And I actually am being nice to you because I think he's going to take your side. Just in me getting to know.
Because I'm right.
Don't say whose side is
no,
whose.
I won't, and you're dead wrong. But anyhow,
Okay.
and you are too if you take his side, just so you know.
This
But
better be multiple choice.
Okay, if you catch a big fish and it's completely legal, I don't care if it's in the ocean, I don't care if it can be anything. A big fish, you get it in the boat, you're so excited about it, you want to get it mounted. Are you the type of person that says, you know what, just take a picture of it and then get the dimensions of it, and they'll make you a big fake one all painted up and it'll look a lot like that fish? Or are you a nostalgic person who says, no, I want to get the actual fish mounted and have that on my wall. I don't want just a representation. And whereas the other side is like, well, the representation is nice because you get to let the fish go, but it's not that fish. So that's kind of the 2 points. So are you the guy that gets the real fish mounted, or are you the guy that gets a fake mount?
Personally,
Be honest now.
I'm going to get the real fish mounted.
Yeah! Woo!
I do like that you're like, would you get the real fish mount or would you get the fake?
I know the whole
No,
time.
I tried
No. The whole time you sold it like his was bad.
Could you tell which one I wanted you to say?
But you got to understand something about that. Okay, when you're talking about harvest.
Yeah.
Okay, in the Michigan Ontario Muskie Club guys are all against harvest, right? When you have that one on the wall, are you ever going to harvest another one?
No.
I have harvested one muskie in my lifetime.
Right.
It's my lifetime fish.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
One and done.
One and done.
One and
I
done.
thought we were having a conservation expert on, but I guess.
I'm glad you took my side on that. Yeah, I knew you were smart, Jim, and now it's verified for all the audience that.
They saw it here.
But that's right. Saw it first here at the Greenway Outdoors.
All right, well, you can pay me afterwards.
That's right. Now, Jim is actually going to be joining us. You'll get to meet him at our premiere party, which is going to be January 3rd. It's at the 242 Church in Brighton. It's from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. We're going to be having a wild game dinner that is going to be fantastic. There's an elk carving station, venison, rabbit, squirrel gravy. I mean, you name it,
nuts.
we're going to have it. It's amazing food. On top of that, we're going to have tons of booths there. Carbon TV is going to be there. NRM Streamcast. Our buddies over at Time's Up Outdoors, Sportsman Alliance, all different types of groups that are going to be there giving away amazing prizes. Come get your picture taken on the red carpet. After that, we're going to be showing the first 2 episodes of our Season 4 of the Greenway Outdoors. Episode 1 will actually be the Sturgeon episode, where Jim's information is going to be featured. Come meet him. Join us for the premiere. Jim, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast tonight.
Appreciate being here. You guys are great.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you so very much. Thanks so much for tuning in. Stay green.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Greenway Outdoors. Check us out on NRM Streamcast, YouTube, Carbon TV, and everywhere podcasts can be found. Please submit all show ideas to thegreenwayoutdoors@gmail.com. See you next week. Stay green.